This is the Indianness podcast, stories of success from leaders and change makers of Indian origin. Why have Indians achieved success across so many different disciplines around the globe? I have no idea, but let's find out together because every story is unique and we have a very unique story with us today. I'm very excited to have Shrimoyee Chakraborty with us today. She's a chef, a broadcaster, and producer, and many things more. She's launched a chain of restaurants in London called Kolkata Street. I invited her on this show as she has an exciting journey from food to TV, which are all industries very tough to break into. I was very curious as to how she was able to do it. Welcome, Shivoy. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on our podcast.
Thank you so much, Sanjay, for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with all these amazing other guests that you've had. So I'm feeling a bit of an imposter syndrome, but I'm sure that we'll be over it. Yeah.
I don't think there's any imposter syndrome here. You've done incredible amount of stuff in such a short period of time, and we are all curious to know about the journey. But to really get to know about the journey, Shimo, you kind of have to go to the beginning. So, can you, you know, tell us a little bit about, or a little bit more about where were you born? Tell us a little bit about your parents, siblings, the environment, etc. So just take a walk down right in the beginning.
Yes. So let's go right to the start. So I was born actually outside of Calcutta in a little suburb um, uh, to a very middle class family. My dad was a struggling entrepreneur when I was born. He eventually became fairly successful. And my mother is a philosophy professor and a classical musician. So I had kind of two different extremes, like just to put in context, right wing and left wing in the same house. Though my dad, like in terms of being an entrepreneur, he was quite entrepreneurial, but at the same time, initially had quite left wing thoughts. He used to be a communist back in the days. That's how my
Wow.
parents in Calcutta's Presidency College, which was quite intellectual hub. Though my dad is nothing of an intellectual, just zero. There is a very intellectualness happening there, but my mom is the opposite end of it. She's a true, very demure, very sophisticated musician, professor vibe. So if you
Mhm,
think of that opposites, I don't know how they attracted each other, but they did somehow. And I have a little brother who
mhm,
came 7 years younger than me, so he came much later in the picture. And yeah, I was born in a middle class family. We were in a joint family. So I lived with my grandparents, my dad's side, but
mhm,
I was very, very close to my maternal grandparents
mhm.
because my mom was actually, my parents had me when they were very young, when they were 21. And in fact, I was a child out of wedlock, which was
Wow.
very rare happening back in the day. So they broke their own rules in many ways. So my mom had to actually go through a PhD and a master's when I was very little. So I spent a lot of time with my maternal grandparents who were very liberal, very modern thinking, but from very middle class background, but they had a very open, broad mind.
Mhm,
And I was very, very close to my grandfather. So yeah, that's kind of the childhood, which is outside of Calcutta, not even, I'm not a big city. Like I wasn't born in a big city. I was born really, really from outside. And there were very little, not many role models to look up to,
mhm,
when I was growing up. I mean, of course, my mom in a certain way, she opened up my world in many ways with her just liberal thinking.
mhm,
I wasn't my immediate family. So my parents weren't raising me like which I thank them for, actually, including my dad, like a quote unquote typical Indian girl in the sense that, my dream, they never told me that my ambitions were to get married,
mhm,
never discussed. Though my father's family was very, very traditional and very orthodox. So they still believed in the Brahmin concept and stuff like that. And I was very, how do I put it in a nice way? Well, I don't have to put it nice way. I was quite the rebellious,
mhm,
rebellious. I just never fit in
mhm,
somehow in my surroundings. So obviously I stood out. I mean, I didn't fit in certain ways. Like, for example, I asked too many questions. I wouldn't take a no for an answer unless you gave me an explanation. and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So obviously, as I don't know, I'm sure you know, like, in traditional conservative Indian families, that's not something that you're not a good girl, right? I wasn't. So it was a bit of a, you know, tug of war growing up. It was a slightly unsettling thing because my uh, growing up in a middle, joint family where you're not looked upon as a good girl, but then your parents teach you. Like my dad would often joke when I was younger, and I was a daughter. I was dark skinned, so that played a big role in my household where I was constantly being told I'm not pretty enough, I'm not going to be intelligent enough because all of that, right? Uh, but my dad would say things like, she doesn't need to get married. She's going to own her own plane one day, But my dad was always giving those crazy ambitions. Like he would just make these fleeting statements, which as a child made me think that, oh, I can achieve anything, as in like, there is no goal to what I need to be. So, I mean, just, yeah. So that was the context where I kind of grew up in this place where, there was this one side where it was very orthodox. My surroundings were very, very conservative. My school, I went to a very Catholic Christian school where it was very, very conservative, very restraining. The education system was not very open. Uh,
Mhm.
Kids weren't encouraged to ask questions. You just had to listen. So, in fact, in my school days, I was always, the teachers were always, she's very intelligent, but if only she's worked harder or whatever, so I was scoring well in, say, maths and certain subjects, which, required just, logic, but history and stuff, I was like just really miserable in. And so I wasn't an excellence in Indian schools. Again, I was getting something like 80%, but that's not good enough, right? Because
Mhm.
unless you're getting 96%, you're bad, right? And it's good or bad. So I was in the bad category always. I mean, bad because she could do so much better if she just tried harder, if she didn't keep questioning people, and if she just shut up. And it was in school and at home. So I would say I was a bit of an unhappy kid, you know? And I was desperate to get out of Calcutta. I was just desperate from as long as I could remember. I was like, I need to leave this place. I'm going to go to Mumbai. And nobody in my family had been abroad at that time. And I was already telling stuff. And when I was like 9 or 10, my mom joked saying, I would go around telling, but I'm going to be in London one day, literally not knowing that I would actually end up in London. So, yeah, that's to paint a picture. That was the real picture.
A lot of interesting threads there, Shimei. So, um, you said something, and as I said, there are multiple threads. That it was not it a happy. You were not a happy child. Now, that's a very relative term because childhood has got a lot of different components. Uh, was it because of the tug and pull between conservative, liberal, not living up to the expectation, as you said? I said we only have two grades as far as Indians are concerned. It's A or A plus, at least as far as US is concerned, and there are only two professions, medicine and engineering. But so what was it like? I mean, there was always this question that she's bright, but if she worked hard, she could realize her potential. So what went through at that time? Tell me, you said you were not happy.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were multiple things about it, right? So, one was obviously, no child likes to feel disliked, right? You live in a joint family and, people constantly comparing you. So, it was like, I wasn't pretty enough. So, I'm never going to get married. I'm too
Mhm.
skinny. So, I'm not going to get married. I am not getting a 90%. So, I'm not gonna be an IIT. So that was the narrative, right? Which was constantly being painted at home. So my mom was my safe net, and my dad, to an extent as well. Not a safe net. My dad was also very aggressive kind of a guy, but I did see him as he was one of the only role models I had because I thought he was really successful, and he was so driven and he was cool, and he had his world vision. And both my parents actually in different ways. But then in school, I was also getting bullied by my peers and the teachers. Actually, the Indian school system was quite nasty back in the days, where the teachers actually label kids and put them into good and bad categories. So it's not a very nurturing experience, right? So, and what do you spend most of your time? You spend most of your time at school and then at
Well,
home. And if both those places felt unsafe, uh, it wasn't. So I was just desperate. And then when I became a teenager, I was, like I said, I was just a bit of a gawky kid. Like, I was just always a little different than other kids. So I was always getting labeled as, whatever. I would say stuff like, I want to go to London one day. People are like, they want to go to IIT. I'm like, oh, I don't want to go to IIT. I want to go to London.
mhm,
Stu- it's very amateurish, right? But I think it came from a place of, I, I just wanted to dream big, but I didn't know what my dreams were. But I was like, okay, I know I want to do something different, and I don't want to be an engineer or a doctor. So eventually, I chose economics because I felt, you know, because anyway, then I worked really hard in my A levels, and I got through on the best college, one of the really good colleges in India. And then suddenly people were like, okay, she's, you know, so what, like, but I think that, and also I was into fashion a lot when I was a kid. And again, in India, suburban India, that was never a good thing because if you're, yeah, fashion a lot, but it's more like, I think I dressed differently than my peers. So I would always look for different things. So I was always looking for, I mean, when I was a kid, I watched like Bertolucci and, Italian cinema and stuff like that.
mhm,
So I was always looking at stuff like, oh, the French do this and the Italians do this.
mhm.
Why do we have to just, uh, think in just such micro spaces? Why do we have to copy everyone? Why can't we just be who we are, kind of thing? So it was an unhappy childhood because of that, right? Because it was constant. My head was saying one thing, then I didn't want to listen to people. So I wasn't going to take no for an answer. So it was constant conflict. And then I got bullied. I was, it was just, I had a very, very, very disturbing child, school life, I would say, early school. And then things really changed after university.
So, just talking about school, I went to a Catholic school. So, just talk a little bit about that because that I think had a big impression on you. Uh, you know, the Catholic schools are very regimented. You have the fathers and the sisters and brothers, and so what happened? I mean, it just was you were picked up on, bullied in what way? By other students, etc. Was it mental, mainly mental
So
bullying?
it's World Mental Health Day today. So it's a good time to actually discuss this. And I've actually never said this out loud before. But yeah, like when I was in my early, so like what, 12, 13, 14, that age group,
Yeah,
I was getting bullied from both ends by the teachers and by the kids. So, there are those 5, 6 kids
yeah.
who won't,
The
mm,
click, the click.
uh, they're the prefects and this and that.
Yeah.
And the teachers are there. And the teachers, the thing is in suburban Indian schools, the teachers who are coming to teach as well also have very little world exposure, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes when they get those jobs, they're not the best in their own academic space, right? I can say that now because, unfortunately, teaching is such a lowly paid profession. And I think that should really change because otherwise, you're not going to attract the best of the crop
Yeah.
in the job.
Garbage in, garbage out. So yeah.
So that's the kind of teachers you had, right? So then if there was, they didn't like me very much because obviously I was questioning. Like, so for example, just to give a small example, right? So
Mhm,
in maths, right? You could do a long drawn formula, right? And I would sometimes just skip a few steps, like easy steps, like which you don't need to show. Like, I mean, come
mhm,
on, like, why do I need to show this silly step? And then like, but I got the answer correct, right? And it clearly looked
yeah.
like I didn't had enough numbers
Mhm,
set. They'd be like, "Oh, we give you 0 for this." I was like, "But why?" Like, and it because I asked a why, and you could just explain it to me, right? But
mhm,
or like I don't know, like say there's a physics experiment, and I would say, "Okay, so can we apply it like this or like that?" Looking back in hindsight, that was classified as like she's too, she's too arrogant. She asks all these questions. But why shouldn't I? Now I think of it, if my daughter, I would encourage my daughter to do this. And
yeah.
in fact, that's what changed when I went for my master's, where suddenly I excelled because teachers liked exactly this quality of me. They were like, oh,
Mhm,
amazing. So glad that she's asking questions because she's interested, right? So that was happening where I was not the good girl. And then, of course, I was wearing, whatever. I was into fashion. So I'm, of course, a
Yeah.
bad girl. I would in my hair and tie my hair into plaits. So I was a bad girl. Because, your character at that age is assassinated by those little things. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the level of maturity are showing. And then the classmates would bully because of my skin color. So I got majorly bullied because of my skin color. So I would get called like crow, kawa, black. They would play games in the school bus and they would be like, okay, let's make her the maid because she looks like a maid. She's too skinny. She's so dark, blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
So, it was like I was
That's
not getting actually accepted anywhere, right? And as a teenager, that's your space. I was also listening to English music, for example. So I would listen to a lot of like whatever Western music,
mhm,
or I would listen to classical music because my mom was a classical musician and I knew a bit about it. So
mhm,
suddenly I was all listening to Bollywood. So again, India is all about Bollywood, right?
mhm,
So again, that was another space. I could just list down many, but I think these were the key pointers, right? And yeah, so at age what, 15, 14, I felt really suicidal. Uh, I actually wanted to end my life. And that was the turning point because my mom really intervened at that point because, I didn't take any, like I just bought some
mhm,
sleeping pills thinking, oh, I'm going to take some of them. And my mom found out. And then she actually went and had a conversation with my principal saying,
mhm,
what are you putting my daughter through? Why are you labeling her as a bad girl? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that didn't really change anything, but I decided that I'm going to leave that school, come what may. So I worked really hard to get good grades in my ICSEs, which is like the
yeah,
GCSEs, right?
mhm,
And I got into a very much better school, which was in Calcutta. And
mhm,
it's like as soon as you move from suburbs to a big city,
mhm,
things suddenly change, right? And then there was those problems went away because I had a fresh slate to start from. But I stuck to my guns. Not a single girl was left in my school because people are scared about like even changing schools for the last 2 years because of whatever. And my parents were petrified. They're like, this girl's not, she, what is she gonna do? She might not even get in. I was like, I will stop studying or I will get into that school. But there is no middle ground. I didn't even, repeat, take my form or whatever. And I think that really changed him. And I, 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 I I became more confident. And then I finally took up economics and statistics and subjects I loved. I really liked in my, these were subjects I chose eventually, right? In your A levels.
mhm.
And I did well. I got the 90 finally that everybody was expecting me to get. But I just wanted, and I didn't study anymore. I studied just, I always do the bare minimum. Like I listened to, I, I was someone who would always participate in class. So I always, I'm very, very, I would really pay attention in class. And so if you do that, you kind of half your job is done, right? Then you just have to like brush up a little bit. And then before the exam, I would just really go all in and then study. And then I'd be fine. So yeah, I think that was one of the big milestones, I would say, where that downer and then finally getting that helped.
Yeah. So I want because you talk about two decisive uh, points in your life, because those are things that for our listeners you might, because it's very helpful. As you said, it's Mental Health Day. So just want to touch very gently on this whole suicide thing that happened. You got that was must have been something really big for you to take such a step, but you got a lot of help and support from a mom on that issue, where she
Just
went back. Just mom.
was it and she didn't talk to anybody else about it because people would even judge me more. My family members would be even more harsh on me, saying, oh, she's doing drama, because in India again, like all
Yeah.
those things, and seriously, right? So my mom was very ahead of times, I have to say, and she really really she really you know came, kind of like cocooned me and came super close. And she became my best friend from that time. And after that, I actually didn't need a best friend because I was like, I don't need these girls because they're so bitchy and mean anyway. I've got my mom and she's cool. And I started hanging out a lot with her friends. And, suddenly, you feel so loved because you're like, okay, this is what the kind of love you look for. And I'm sure every teenager goes through that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, not everybody probably, because some teenagers are the pretty ones, some want the smart ones. I was kind of fitting nowhere. So, but no, it was not the most, like I said, that's why I said it was not a very happy memory. And I
It's
couldn't
gotten a
wait.
lot tougher with social media, to be very frank with you. It's just
I
gotten amplified.
was so worried about my daughter. And I really hope social media takes a,
Yeah,
inward turn by the time she grows up. Because I've got a 3-year-old now. And I'm like, I really
yeah,
don't want this world to influence her so much because it's
exactly.
so toxic, is the
Yeah,
word.
and a lot of pressure. But, coming back, you said you felt, you got very close to your mom. So that was a safe environment for you. Getting closer to your mom also was a very important thing, as you said. You didn't need other friends, etc. So I think that's a great thing that happened. But after that, how you went back to school also, and you got good grades. That that period must have been tough going because mom went to the administration. The administration didn't do squat, obviously, and you still had to go back day in and day out and face those same people.
Yeah.
So you had to pull something from within you. Where were you pulling that, Shima?
I think it was a bit of a blur, honestly. I don't remember.
Really?
I just thought, okay, I've got the last year to get through, and that's it. And I need to just study, focus on my things. Uh, yeah, it was pretty torturous, honestly. I just didn't want to go back. I remember at one point I was so scared of wearing my school uniform. I mean, I actually still get anxiety if I look at that uniform because I'm like,
Wow. Why is
yeah,
that?
yeah, because I was just so scared of going to that school.
School.
It was, it was a scary place for me. And funny enough, about 7, 8 years back, when I'd opened my restaurants, just and I was a lot in the press and the media and stuff. My same principal called my mother, and I hadn't mentioned my school in the article. I mentioned my second school,
Of
which is where I
course.
really felt
Yeah.
better. And she got offended that I didn't mention that she called my mother up at home. She found our phone number from somewhere because she couldn't get hold of me because I
Right.
was in London. And she was like, why did your daughter not mention the name of our school? That's where she got her education. Because without that school, she wouldn't be where she is. And my mom was like, you know what? You're right. Because without that anger, she wouldn't be where she is.
Or she
And
said that.
yeah,
Wow.
because my mom still holds a lot of, she doesn't hold grudges about many things, but I think when it's your daughter, right? And you see
Yeah.
them in such vulnerable
Pain.
thing. Yeah. And my mom is very a woman of few words. But she said that because she was like, and they tried to invite me for a talk at school, which I never went to.
You've
Because I
never
was like,
visited your school back again, ever? The Catholic school?
they invited me once or twice to do a
Okay.
talk, but I declined every time. And yeah, so, and I think I did a BBC interview where I said, how horrible a time I had in school. I don't know if they heard it,
Mm, okay.
but I think
Well,
it's important for teenagers to know this because school, we glorify schools a lot. Not everybody has that same glorious childhood that,
yeah.
and parents should be really vigilant on that aspect of, like, if your child is not happy,
Yeah.
if you put them in another school, they might just excel. And that's something I'm hyper vigilant with my daughter because for me, that most important thing for her should be she should be feeling happy going to school, safe going to school, because that's the place she's going to spend so much of her time in. And if that's not going to happen, then I'd rather her go to another school, but
Yeah.
not deal with that. Yeah.
Well, I think that's an excellent point. So then you went to this school, you were in the 90% category, you became a good girl suddenly, and you went to this school. That was a whole different experience, right? An
Yeah.
inflection point, you discovered yourself. How was that? Tell us a little bit about that.
It was really good because, I was in Calcutta in a big city. My parents had moved houses. So we moved to Calcutta then. We
To
weren't living in
Kolkata.
the
Mhm.
Uh, I was suddenly exposed to a different world. People were more liberal, all of that.
Mhm.
And it was, and then my ambitions grew bigger. I was like, this is not good enough. I need to go to Mumbai. I was doing my SATs actually to go to the US, and I actually scored decently, but then I realized I'm not going to get scholarship, and I just didn't want to take my dad's money and go to the US. So I was like, okay, let me finish my undergrad from a good university in India. Then
Okay.
I can go for my master's to the UK potentially. And then if I want, I can do my MBA from the US. So I kind of started chalking my career, and I started having more people, more discussions with more ambitious kids around me who were discussing going to the US, going to whatever, going to the UK, or
Mhm.
who were not just applying to IITs
Mhm.
because or wanting to just be doctors or engineers. There was more opening up, right? I met
Right.
people who were, oh, I want to go to St. Stephen's. Oh, I want to do economics. I want to do journalism. And,
Mhm.
it started, at one point I was like, oh, I want to be a pilot. I couldn't
Uh,
because I didn't have eyesight. But, you just started looking, I started finding a bit more of a direct self-taught direction where I was like trying to see where I could go. But it also was a confidence booster because it was, yeah, I didn't start, I started feeling like, okay, I'm not so bad. I'm not a bad girl,
yeah.
that started.
Well, that's great. Were the social stuff also good because the social was horrible in the prior school? Did you start making some friends also in this new place?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I've always since then been very wary of making friends. So even till date, I have very, very limited friends. So
Why?
people, uh, uh, I'm actually somewhere deep down scared of women. Men have become better friends to me than women have. So I have some excellent female friends now, but it's just four. I can literally count them in my fingers, right? And I'm very close to them. Uh, and I can't pretend. So that's the other thing. I remember being told, you need to learn to be more diplomatic, and you can't just speak your heart out all the time. You can't just say what's in your mind. And I can't do that. It's just not me. So I'm someone I need to work towards my ambitions. And if I'm gonna socialize, then I don't want to be diplomatic. And even in my work, I don't want to be diplomatic because if I'm working hard, if I'm sincere, if I'm honest, if I'm delivering on time, before time, then why do I need to play games? And if I do need to play games, then that's not where how I want to go forward.
That's true.
Maybe that's why I'm not Padma Lakshmi. I'm not saying sorry. Don't go to this.
So in that school, you started making some friends, because it was a little bit of opening up, you say for yourself emotionally that, hey, I can feel secure enough to, open myself up to friends, in those 2 years.
Yeah, and I could be myself. I could
You
be
could be yourself,
people didn't have preconceived notions about it, right? So I
right?
came in as a teenager. I didn't come in as a 3-year-old because the kids who knew me in that school, they knew me since I was 3
Okay,
till the time 14, right?
right.
And this saw me as a different person. And I had become a bit more confident, I guess, because cracked the exams. I got through the school. It was very difficult to change schools with, economics, maths, the combination I wanted because it was
Mhm.
a few that's left because it's always internal.
Yeah.
People get in. So I felt a bit of confidence, and I guess people looked at me slightly differently because they
Mhm.
were like, "Oh, she must be good because if she's gotten through." So
Mhm.
that stuff happened as well. So I guess people, yeah, I guess it was just a new lease of life for me.
That's great. So now walk us through. So what happened? You went from there. You scored well enough. You decided, I'm doing SATs, but don't want to take dad's money. So where did you end up after those 2 years from Cal? You
So
decided to go to
I wanted to
Bombay?
go. Neo wanted to go to the top five, one of the top five
Hmm.
in India. Yeah. So I got through St. Stephen's history, but the college seemed nice. But the subject, I was like, what am I going to do with history? I mean, I'm sure the people who've done brilliant things. I was also scared of the subjects. I was like, I don't know. And I got through LSR, which is Lady Shri Ram College in Delhi.
Of course.
journalism, and I got to science economics.
Wow.
So and
All
these were
great,
all,
great
uh,
colleges.
yeah. So I was like, okay, let's go for science economics.
Wonderful. So how was that experience? Now, this was where in Bombay?
Bombay, yeah. It was
Yeah.
wonderful. I was a kid in a candy store. It was like suddenly from Mumbai, Calcutta to Mumbai is a transition like, I don't know, Montana or Chicago to New York, right? So that's the transition.
Montana to New York is a better one. Chicago to New York is fairly the same, but yes, Montana.
So it was like, wow, people are completely different
Uh,
suddenly. And, in Mumbai, Cal gives you a bit of intellect, right? Calcutta. So I did stand out. I was like, suddenly I was a smart one in class. I was the top, top tier. And the teachers were very nice to me. We had professors like Arundhati Roy, some of the top, professors that you could think of, guest lecturers were coming. Like, living in Mumbai, I was independent. I was staying alone. I had to figure out my own food. I had to manage a budget. And my ambitions just grew higher, right? Wow, there is so much more to do. So my first year of college, I did an internship so I was then very set on like, okay, I need some good brands on my CV. If I want to go to the UK for my master's, I need to get a scholarship.
yeah.
So I got, so first year, so I never came home for my holidays. So
Mm,
I was partying and stuff like other kids, but I was also from first year on, I was like, I knew I wanted to go to the UK. So I was like, I need to get the best jobs as in internships so that I could just learn. So first year I did Unilever, second year I did Disney, and then third year Disney called me back. Uh, and then so it was with Star T
yeah.
actually, and I was intern, marketing intern,
Mhm.
and one of the presenters didn't show up to work. Like they had the set ready, and they were like completely hassled because production costs a lot of money, and they were
Yeah.
like, "Oh my god, who's there? Who can speak English? Who can speak English?" And we're like, "You." So they started auditioning a few of us, in little camera, and I was like, "Sure, I'll do it. Why not?" So I went for the audition. They just selected me immediately. They were like,
Wow.
"Okay, there's a show. You're gonna host it now." I was like, "Great!" And suddenly, from an intern who was getting paid nothing, I was getting paid at that 10,000 rupees a day, which
Wow.
felt like a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
Uh, because of it. And then obviously my makeup artist later told me they're making you shoot 5 episodes, presenters charge that money or more per one episode. I was like, I don't care, man. I'm 19. I got money. I bought my first pair of designer sunglasses. I got my loads of presents. I took them out to ITC for dinner. Just like so happy. And I was like, and I knew it was like just 3 months
Mhm.
because I was going to the UK. And in the meanwhile, I'd gotten accepted
Oh,
in
wow.
UK. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to the UK. This is 3 months of free time. My mom was like, don't you want to take a holiday? Don't you want to spend time with us before you go for good? Because knowing you're not going to come back. I was like, it's work. It's going to be great for my CV. It's great. I'm having a great time. I learned a fair amount because I was writing my own scripts because I was like, I'm not going to say these cheesy lines.
Mhm.
And I wanted to speak in English. And the writers who were writing the scripts, I didn't really like what they were writing very much. And the producer was like, no, no, she's good. She let her do her own scripts. So I was
Mm.
even writing scripts, doing my own costumes because I was like, I'm not going to wear all these blingy clothes. I'm going to just wear my own clothes. So it was great. It was my first experience with television.
Wow. So another inflection point where the host doesn't show up, and you got this opportunity. Another light bulb went off that you can do anything you put your mind to.
It didn't feel like that at the moment. It felt more frivolous and fun. It felt like, quick money,
Yeah, but
sure.
looking back, do you think so?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, in some ways, but yeah, looking back actually, because at that point it felt okay. In all honesty, I felt like I was, that typical teenage, well,
Yeah,
like
of
19
course.
year who
Yeah.
was watching at that point Woody Allen and stuff like that,
Yeah.
right? I kind of had a slight smirk on this stuff. Uh, so I was like, sure, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to learn. That's the attitude I had
Yeah.
in my mind. I was like, I'm going to make, when I do something, this is great, it's fun, but, I wouldn't say I was paying it. Uh, I wanted, if that was the BBC, that would have been a different question, right? Because
Mhm,
I was at that point looking at Anthony Bourdain, I was looking at Nigel Lawson, I was looking at David Attenborough.
mhm,
So I was thinking in my head, so that's the other thing, right? So I'm never happy in the moment. I'm always looking at, look at that. Why can't I do that?
mhm,
You know? So, but now that you say, yeah, looking back, it's funny you say that because till even recently, I wouldn't include this experience in my bio. Till my agent one day questioned me, saying, "What? You did that? Why don't you include that in your bio?" I was like, "No, that's so cringe. I don't want anyone to look at it. Like it's some stupid thing I did." He was like, "This is relevant experience," and I was like, "Yeah, but that's not." So for me, I think it's more about like unless it's excellent and something I've like I'm very proud of my restaurant, and I will still. I think that's my baby, but I did it with my own hands. I knew every detail. It was something I was proud of.
mhm.
But uh, but yeah,
But
I
you were
think
19. You were an intern who just got pulled in,
yeah,
and you delivered. You got 10,000 rupees. You went to ITC, which you would never have gone to, or and gotten
that,
designer sunglasses, which you wouldn't have been able to buy. So that was pretty cool.
that was.
Yeah. So,
Because at that time I was in transition and I was thinking of London. My eyes were
well,
set
you
on
were
London.
always thinking of London, even when you were 4 years old or five
Yeah,
years old. So London's always been the common theme, Shrimoyee, in the life you have.
yeah.
So,
So yeah,
so then you, after this, you got accepted in London,
yeah.
and you didn't say I want to spend time with parents, etc. Because uh, one of the themes that comes across is you're very ambitious, and you know dad has been very successful, mom has been very successful, and you know her way. Where do you think it comes from in some ways? Because you are exceptionally ambition for going to the next level. It's not about just, hey, can I make the most money or stuff like that. You just want to excel and go to the next level. That's the
If
theme that comes across.
it cuts, then pay rises.
Yeah.
It's true because I'm like, if I'll up something,
Mhm.
I'll be like, I mean, I left when I started my restaurants. I left a very high paying job to do that because it was like, I don't want to be my boss. I don't want to be their CEO. So I want, so it was like, okay, to take, so I always feel like my investors actually for my restaurants always used to joke saying she's going to either end up millionaire or bankrupt, which, which is
It's
the
all or
story.
nothing. It's all or nothing.
Yes. So I think the ambition comes from my dad
It comes from your
because
dad.
growing up, I remember
Are you
seeing
close
him
to him?
working. No, not.
Yeah, because your mom is your safe place.
We're very similar people, but also my dad is a very aggressive person. So yeah, we never we at certain level get along. I really get him, and he gets me as well. I think, but we're too uh, we clash.
Strong-willed,
Yeah, we
strong-willed
clash.
people. Yeah,
We're
happens.
slow get along a bit more because. But my dad was also very proud. He never can uh, celebrate. I've never been told by my parents, "Well done." Never. My mom now starts saying, but when I was growing up, nobody came for my graduation. Nobody. I did all my graduations on my own. I remember asking my parents, you want to come? They were like, what were you expecting to fail?
Wow.
What are we celebrating exactly? And I was like, oh, my friends, parents are coming. And I remember both my graduation, like I have photos on my own.
Wow. Well, we're going to send them your podcast and say we are celebrating you, Shima, because really that's what we're doing. Um, so you ended up in London then, right?
Man,
How Manchester. So how was that? Just walk us through that journey.
so
That's your
imagine
dream. Your dream. Was it as you had visualized? Because a lot of times we have this things. I want to do this. I want to do this, and when you achieve that, and sometimes it's a little bit of a letdown.
it was better because,
Really.
I'd never been abroad before. I'd never traveled international. My parents had never traveled international. I went to London. My mom still remembers. I was all of 20. I had 7 suitcases because I packed everything that I could, and and I left. And and my mom says, I said bye bye. They were crying, and as soon as I passed security, I didn't even look back. But also forget that I had extra baggage. I didn't want to go ask my dad for money, so I hustled with somebody, this older woman. I said, "Listen, you have one bag. Look at my bag. I'm just a student. I've got nothing special. Can you please take a couple of bags for me?" So my parents were watching all this from the back. They were wondering what's going on. Why am I opening all the suitcases? Trans- Inside took a lot of my bag. Was just so excited to go. And I landed, and my dad had given me £100, you know,
Yeah.
uh, just, I landed at 9 p.m. I had no clue. People research. And, this was before that whole internet
Right.
crazy, right? I didn't have Google Maps or anything. I just I remember my dad got me a BlackBerry phone, and that didn't have anything. So I was like, okay, how do I get there? I was like, 7 suitcases. Taking the tube seems a bit unrealistic, or train. So
Yeah.
let me just take a taxi. So I took a taxi. This taxi driver just dropped me in the middle of the university, which is a huge campus. I didn't even write paper, which told me exactly the name of my student hall. So I
Right.
just knew which dorm I was in. So I was like asking all these people, dragging all these bags and bus, and somehow managed and to reach. And yeah, next day I had to just build my life, buy my mattress, buy all of that stuff. It was freezing. It was September, raining, cold. But I remember first day and felt like I was in a movie, because I was like, oh, it's a student, freshman kind of week.
Yeah.
Students are there on the streets. The streets is like the university is a huge campus, right? So I was like, wow, this is like living in a, I don't know, like a British film or something. I loved the accent. I loved it all. I was like, wow, this is great. And suddenly started getting attention, and I started getting told that I'm pretty and stuff on the street, which was a shocker to me. I was like, I didn't believe it. I was like, I was called ugly all my life in India. Now suddenly people think I'm pretty. London gave me everything. Like London has given me the confidence that India could never give me. I mean, if I was in India, I wouldn't have done restaurants because nobody would have invested. I raised 1 million, just under £1 million when I was 25 years old. That would have not happened in India. I had private equity people. I don't know, even now when I do my shows, I sell it in the US or the UK because people accept me in the West a lot more than India has ever accepted. And I still feel that. I'm still a misfit in India. And it's this sad story continues.
Mm. Uh, so London was as good or even better than you had, thought growing up, because that was your big dream. And college was pretty remarkable. So tell us what happened after college. Was it the restaurant? What happened?
No. So I went to do my master's in business and finance.
Hmm.
So doing that. And from day one, I had one agenda. I was like, here, I don't care about my grades.
Hmm.
What I care about is getting a job, because I knew that my visa would run out and companies wouldn't,
Right.
to stay in the UK, I would have to get a company
Hmm.
to sponsor my visa.
Right.
So everybody else was partying. I used to go to class, pay attention, straight to the library, and I started applying for jobs like a job. I took it as a job. So I would go from 4 to 8 every day and just look at, all the grad schemes, keep applying, keep applying, keep applying, connect with people on LinkedIn, figure out. I mean, again, like I was a kid connecting with I would connect with CEOs. In fact, I still remember a story. I connected with the MD of uh, Universal Pictures in London, and
Oh,
he accepted my request. So I was like, oh, because I was just connecting randomly, and so
right.
I messaged him. He was like, you know what? I'm going to meet you for a coffee just because of your balls. I mean, a 22-year-old, 21-year-old has never messaged me.
Wow.
So he actually met me for a coffee. It was amazing. I was like, oh, thank you. And it was really, he gave me some nice advice and stuff. But yeah, it was just like, it. I took up, so in my final semester, we had to do a dissertation. So we
Mm-hmm.
had two choices. Either you do a plain dissertation or you make it a bit more complex where you do a dissertation with an internship
Mm-hmm.
and you get graded 50% by the internship boss and
Mm-hmm.
50% by, and
Right.
then it had a bit longer. So I was like, okay, right, I'm getting that. And not everybody got that because you had to get selected in the interview process. So I managed to get that with Insider Media, this media,
Mhm.
British media company. So they gave me the internship. So two of us got that one. I was the only international student who got that one actually. So I went there and I put all my heart in the internship. I was like, okay, I need to convert this into a job
Yeah.
because what I need to do. And they actually offered me a job, but then WPP offered me a job at the same time. And it made more sense and it was a grad scheme and stuff. So I was like, okay, let me go there. So yeah, the WPP happened, MediaCom. So I got my visa. I actually got a job offer the day before I submitted my dissertation, which I think I was the only person in my class who got that. So everybody was like, oh my God, well, how do you do that? I was like, well, I wasn't partying like you guys. I still
Yes.
did part. So I was at it. Um, and I remember calling my dad because I had told my dad because we were having a bit of tough time. I said, I don't want a penny from you from the day I graduate. And I actually did take a penny from that day on.
Wow. That's determination. So ambition, determination. Uh, wow. So you went to WPP. How was that experience?
Amazing. Again, like really good. For me, everything from then on was just learning, 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 getting, there are stupid, people will say that then lot of small things like, not small things, they're big things, right? Like an immigrant to get a job in the UK to be sponsored with a visa is 50 times harder than a loan, right? Because
Mhm.
why should a company pay money for your visa?
Yeah.
So yeah, people can complain about it, right? But then you have to play by the rules. You're in that country. You are choosing to go there. If you're not like, if you want to really work hard, you're going to make it, right?
Right.
Same thing within a company. I can't expect that I'm going to show up to this global company with all these cool people. And I come from India, frankly, right? I didn't know the cultural references, the coolness, all of that. Did I get like little people make fun of me a little bit? People made fun of my accent. Of course they did. It was a sexy media company. So
Mhm.
that happened. But then
Mhm.
I didn't take that negatively. I, in fact, was like, okay, what can I learn from it?
Yeah.
Do I need to dress slightly different? Do I need to speak slightly different? Do I need to read up a bit more? Do I need to watch some more shows like, whatever, the skills or whatever to get
Mhm.
those jobs? Let's do that. Let's invest in that, right? So I started doing it that way because, I was having a blast. I was in the swanky office with free food. They were taking us to pool parties. I have
That's true.
enough money to pay rent, party, buy stuff. It was great. And from then on, then I got headhunted. And in that time, I actually started a food blog because I obviously, I had a job. In those jobs, they don't expect you to do much, right? I was working 8 to whatever, 6. Then I
Mhm.
was like, I've got loads of free time. So I'm going to do this blog. And that blog slowly started. And actually, the WPP job taught me marketing. So I was kind of using that marketing skill in my blog and then suddenly started getting noticed by Channel 4, BBC, and they started calling me for like little TV stuff. I was like, okay, so I was having like this two kind of parallel thing going on.
Right.
And that I got a job with Yelp. I think that was a big turning point. Because Yelp at that point, I was like 23. They came and said, we want you to launch Yelp in Manchester. So I was like,
Oh,
and they gave me a salary cut down. But I was like, wow, that's an amazing responsibility. I get to hire people. I was like, absolutely, I'll take that. So I took that. I worked day in, day out in that job, like weekends. I didn't care. It was not a job. I was living, breathing that company. They took me to San Francisco. I was like, for a kid, that's what it matters. They give you a MacBook, they take you to San Francisco, they squeeze the living daylight out of you. You're like,
yeah.
yeah, take it.
Yeah.
Uh, all the energy. So I performed well there. Then they wanted me to move to a sales role. And I was like, sales is not my scene because I can't do forced things. I can do things naturally with strategy, but I can't do sales. So it didn't work for me. And then I was like, but I was still wanted to move to London. So I moved to London with Sunday Times, and I'll cut it short. From Sunday Times, I went there, dream job again. But then I took an even more pay cut because I wanted to work for the Sunday Times. But, and it added definitely to my CV. But I realized I'm working with some trust fund babies. Everybody in a big media organization are basically my peers, all had houses in South Kent or Chelsea. So they didn't need the salary, whereas I couldn't afford my tube. And I was like eating in the canteen and staying up till like 7 p.m. at work so that I can finish my dinner there and go. I was like, this is just unrealistic. And then magically, Asia House, the think tank, offered me a job because I was doing business and policy. I had the degree, and I didn't think I would get the job. And my uncle is an is a chief economist for was now he's for Citibank, but back then for Standard Chartered. An Indian budget had released that year, and so when they called me for the interview, I had somehow read my uncle's article on the Indian budget. Asked me about that, so I blagged my way into the interview. Honestly, I got like a pay rise, which was 4x.
Yep.
And that was my last job. And then I opened my restaurants. And all this, by the way, while doing all of these jobs, my blog was still kind of growing.
So, are you a foodie?
Yes, I am. Foodie. I don't like the word foodie.
Okay, so
Uh,
what would be the expression?
I,
That's an
I,
American expression, but
I
kind
like
of.
food and I love hosting. I love cooking for people. And I am very, I don't know. I mean, some people say I'm gifted or whatever. So, when I cook, it's very instinctive. And it's less about the dots and the smears. It's more about the taste. It's more about the feeling, more about the emotion, more about the stories. And, it has to be tasty. You can give me a good looking dish, but if it's not tasty, I'm not going to eat it.
Yeah.
So it's not satisfying. So I love food in that kind of way. And food really started for me was the only. So when I went to the UK, I realized, so all the positive things I've obviously said, the negative things that I realized, which I kind of touched upon, was I realized soon enough that Indians weren't looked upon as cool, right? And there was mild racism, not racism, but mild like ignorance, which results in racism happening, which was like, the Indian accent is always made fun of. Indian food is always made. I mean, you always eat Indian food after a beer at a kebab shop. It's not fancy. You don't take your date to an Indian curry house, right? And also I realized this undertone of somehow like the Italians are cool, the French are cool, Indians, not so much there, right? We're like, oh, South Asians kind of. That's the vibe I got. They're so blingy. They're so loud. They all have arranged marriages and all of that. And I didn't like that was one thing I didn't like. And that's what my blog was trying to do. I was trying to show,
Change the perception.
yeah, with through my blog, through my being at work in my small ways. And then, so that story kept going. And eventually, after Asia House, when I decided to open my restaurant, because while doing Asia House, actually, I started getting pop up opportunities. Well,
Mhm.
I flew to one pop up because that time I was like, oh, I have lots of money now. I was obviously getting 3 times paid more. So I was like, okay, one weekend, I believe in like return on investment. So I'm like, okay, all these people following my blog. Will they pay for my food? So I decided to do a pop up where I told a restaurant, which was not doing very well. I said, listen, you don't have many customers on a Thursday night, right? You definitely are not very full on a Sunday afternoon. I have 1,700 followers and I have some journalists following me. I used to work for the Times. Why don't you let me use your kitchen? You take all the profit, but just get me the ingredient. Let me cook. So that was my deal. He said, sure. And I
Wow.
said, okay. And it was fully booked out because that was the first time somebody had done Calcutta food in London. So loads of people showed up and I marketed it. So again, all these jobs taught me how to market
Yeah.
in the right way. And suddenly the BBC interviewed me and things snowballed. So while my career was going, my professional career, this was snowballing. And then I started getting pop-up opportunities every weekend. I was doing with Michelin star chefs and this and that. So I kept doing pop-ups almost every weekend, working all the whole week at a think tank. Then weekends when pop-ups, I was It was great. And but then through the think tank, I met VCs and PE funds. And I was like, and I was looking at a lot of proposals. I was like, these rubbish plans are raising money. These are like just bubble concepts, which are never going to actually make real revenue. A
Right.
lot of don't make any cash for the longest time. I was like, here's my business plan. So I knew how to make a business plan. I knew how to make a P&L.
Mhm.
This makes money, from day one,
Yep.
right? So I was like, let me try and pitch it. And what's there to lose, right? Nothing's there to lose. So I pitched to a VC partner who was a client of ours actually. And because everybody was interested in my pop-ups, they were like, oh, Shrim, by the way, how's your pop-up going? I was like, on that note, I have something. So I took out a plan and he said, listen, if you're serious, I'll invest. So I said, what do you mean by serious? And, I take things very literally. And he said, find a property. I said, okay, commercial property, no clue what that meant. Next day, I couldn't focus at work. So I just called him. I said, I'm really sick. I have to go. So I left and I just went straight to like estate agents. I went to 7. Nobody entertained me. They were giving me their business cards and saying, who's this kid coming? They were like, please, bye-bye. Eventually, one guy, Oliver, if you're watching this, took pity on me. He said, you know what? I'll show you some properties. I said, okay, great. So let's see some properties. So we saw 12 properties. And that evening, this is by the time it was 7 p.m., I was like, okay, I love this one. He's like, what do you mean you love? I said, what do I have to do? He's like, you have to pay a deposit to take it off the market. I said, okay, how much is it? He was like, 10,000 pounds. So I kind of checked my bank account. I had about 11,000 pounds. I said, here you go. And I said, okay, give me a photo of this. So I took a photo, sent it to that guy, the VC guy. He immediately called me in like 5 minutes. He was like, what are you doing? Get a property. And this was the night before, right? He told me.
Right.
He was like, I didn't realize you could just go and get a property.
Then you take him literally.
Yeah. So then he was like, okay, you know what? I'll draft up a contract. And he just sent 40,000 pounds to my
Wow.
bank account. He was like, if you manage to do this, I'm going to open a restaurant. So, and that was my first funding. And then I started getting other investment. And then eventually a big private equity fund came in and they invested the major chunk. But all of that happened in 3 months because I left my job the very next day. So I got the 40,000. I walked in. I said, guys, I'm resigned. They were like, what? You just got a promotion. I was like, yeah, but I want to open my restaurant. They were like, and I remember my boss telling me, 95% restaurants in London fail, right?
Right.
I was like, yeah, but
5%.
why don't I take that chance?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's how the restaurants open.
And how many? You had multiple restaurants or one?
So I had 2 restaurants and 3 kind of market stalls.
Market store.
Like
And
because after doing 2 standalone restaurants, which I would never do them again because they're very capex heavy. And I
yeah,
think in hindsight, I was quite young and whatever. So you only learn. I had no idea of how to open a restaurant, right?
right,
But in hindsight, learned is this. There are 3 types of restaurants that can work. One is QSR models, where it's very small investment, but you open multiple and
right.
right? A McDonald's,
Mhm.
best business model, right? Because you're investing really in real estate, right?
Yeah.
Food is by the way. And you do one thing and one thing only. Or you are like a super high-end Michelin star restaurant. Your margins are super low. Somebody's money laundering there. It's fine. And the middle range is you're a rich person. You're a celebrity. You have a property already. You don't need to pay rent. And then, if you don't need to pay rent, which is like what, 20%, 18 to 20% of your P&L, then you have a good margin, right? So mom and pop shops make money because they actually probably bought the property ages back.
Yeah.
Or QSRs, small quick service, great. Top of the range, money laundering happening, whatever. Most of them are losing money every day. I mean, if you look around, you would know which one is making money and which one is. So
That's
your
true.
China are making money. So that's something I realized very quickly, that because I wanted to open a restaurant which was Indian, but sexy. I wanted to open it in Soho. I didn't like high end street, Charlotte Street. I was like, if I'm going to do it, I had the interior design and the architect. We came to India, to Calcutta. We got the furniture shipped because I wanted the vintage furniture from Calcutta that was going to go there. The menu was completely, very authentic, but I kept with local ingredients, sustainable produce, all of that. The music I curated with a musician. I wanted the music to be right. I wanted the atmosphere to be right. So even the plates, I got like champagne coupes, which women back in the days in Tolly Club would use. So
Mhm.
everything had a story behind it. And, I think that is why it got a lot of press coverage and stuff. But, does it make a lot of financial sense? No, it doesn't.
Uh, it's a hard, it's a hard business, as I think everybody knows. So then, what? Now you're on to the TV. What is it?
So,
What is the current project?
yes,
I mean,
4 years.
current projects. I would say it's never a project with you.
Yeah, yeah. So 4 years of restaurant, and then I got actually at a big turning point. I got cancer. I got a big burnout. I got cervical cancer, and my granddad died all in the same month. So I decided to close the restaurants. But it was fine. I got treated immediately, and then I had to pay off some debt. So I immediately took up a job, which I was offered to open UK's first dark kitchen brand. So I opened like about 15, 7 of them in the UK, paid off all my debts. Then I was like, okay, back to I did that for a year and did jobs for a year. I was like, okay, I want to make TV shows now. This is what I always wanted to do. And let me be brave and go for it. There's one life to do it. And so I again invested my own money and made a pilot. It took a long time to sell it. Once I made the pilot, it was easier, but pandemic hit and I was pregnant. So I sold the show while I was pregnant during the pandemic and then made the first show, India Bite, which is what you've seen. So that's out now. Now I'm working on 2 other shows. One is on Mahua, which is a tribal alcohol that is found only in the tribal areas of India. And in India, it was banned by the Brits. And Indians still don't respect it and don't drink it there. It's bootlegged and stuff like that. It's illegal, it's banned. But now there are 20 Mahua bars in Paris and a few in London
Wow.
about that. That's one. And other one I'm working on is called Super Feeders. I don't want to give too much about it, but it's a little we started filming already. So that's about feeding fussy kids around the world.
Feeding
Like
what kids?
fussy kids. Every parent, no matter where you go, which country you go, is not happy with their way the kid. And it's about yeah. So it's kind of getting the shame out of the parents and stuff like that.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. So now, when you obviously you've had an amazing journey, and the journey is just beginning because you've got uh, were there, and this is the question we asked everybody, just briefly, were there any mentors along the way in the journey?
I mean, yeah, like in different stages, right?
Yeah,
You mean
and they come in different shape and form. Sometimes it's mom, and sometimes it's dad, sometimes it's teachers.
absolutely. I think my investors, my partner, my husband, he is a finance person. I remember when we met, I was opening my second restaurant and I was still very bad. I was always scared of reading legal documents. Was that something that really scared me?
Yeah.
And he told me one day, there are many talented people like you, but making excuses of that I can't read legal documents, that's not going to make you a good CEO because, these are just bullshit excuses. You've done an economics master's. Why can't you read a legal document? I'm not going to read it for you unless you read them, highlight the points, and then I'll analyze them. So I remember that hit me. I was like, did you just insult my intelligence? It was like, I'm going to read legal documents. And now I'm actually very good at reading legal documents because of practice. So I remember, gave me a reality check that, you've got to do it all. You've got to learn how to read legal documents. You need to, my accountant told me, for example, that Shrim, I'm not going to read your P&L every time for you. You're going to read them. You're going to tell me what's wrong. And so again, Jahangir, my accountant, he was like a dad a little bit. So yeah, my investor, Mark, was fabulous from the PE fund. I almost felt like he was this dad figure for me. Um, there were, Shireen, one of my investors, she was so elegant, so classy. She just, how to conduct yourself. I remember when I was just newly in restaurants and I was getting photographed, I would have my nails chipped, you know, hair never done. I didn't care about those things. She was like, now you're slowly getting interviewed and stuff like that. You need to be presentable. You need to, you look
Yeah,
good and all. And the rawness will only last for so long. You need to start polishing yourself. So there are many, many people who came in different forms. Who, my daughter now, she's taught me patience.
that's true. They come in all different forms, and that's one of the messages for our people who listen. That looking out for mentors. Sometimes we don't even realize that. So, Shivaya, where do you see the journey going from here? I mean, it's hard to obviously in this current world that we live in predict, but where would you like to see this journey go from? How about you?
Well, I would, you know, I don't know about my journey, but what I would like to do through my journey is something I know and which has been consistent actually, is I want the West to look at India in a different light in the entertainment space, uh, in the, you know, just, yeah, media space that, we have all these successful people in tech, in, um, CEOs, but somehow when it comes to entertainment, India is still looked down, you know? Oh, Priyanka Chopra has changed that.
Mhm.
But again, she's more in the fiction space. You know, I'm talking about, bringing out real Indian stories because I make documentaries and I want to stick to that. I want to make unscripted shows because I find the real stories are the best stories. Like the women I interviewed and met in Chhattisgarh, in Bastar, who are making the tribal alcohol. They are cool. They are so badass. We don't talk about these Indian women. Why do we all have to come in this? Why is one package an accepted norm? Why are, I want India to be looked at as they look at, I don't know, San Francisco or California, like at least, or London or Paris or Italy, whatever. So I want to make shows which represent India in that light where people get to learn or have an aha moment. You're like, oh, okay, uh, that's there too. You know, that's cool. India is not just a land of arranged marriages and engineers and IT back offices. There is a lot more going on.
That's pretty cool. Being involved in media and using that as a medium to maybe show different aspects of India. Much, much needed, I think so. And I got to check out that Mahua thing that you said. I had no idea about that.
It,
So,
it's not up public yet, but I'll send it to you
okay.
for your.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. Now, we've got into the future. I'm just going to take you very briefly to the past. So let's just pretend this is Shiromaya, who's just uh, graduating out of the college in Mumbai. What would be your advice, knowing what you know, to Shiromaya, who's just graduating out of college and looking at big dreams to go to London? Because this is also a message to our listeners, actually, indirectly that you're giving.
Yeah. I would just say be less angry. Do exactly what you've done, but with less anger and with less, a bit more patience. I mean, I guess, no, maybe at that age, patience wouldn't have worked. If I wasn't impatient, I wouldn't be doing things. But I would say less anger. Uh, yeah, but in certain ways, patience, because I think I would have picked up more things if I was slightly more patient. Uh, yeah. And, but, but otherwise, yeah, not much because I don't think if I slowed down or did any of that, the thing is, I'm nowhere near where I want to be. So I'm still not there. But yeah, I don't think I would change much. Besides, I was quite an I was angry about a lot of things, and I just wish that I had less angst.
But you don't have as much angst now, which is a great thing.
No, the motherhood.
Motherhood.
Motherhood has
So I was going to
has
say that.
and therapy, years of therapy.
Yeah,
So for 6 years of therapy is what helps. I highly recommend it. Yeah.
absolutely. We always end with a very brief two things that we ask all our guests. We're creating a cloud for those weeks. Your idea, a brief idea of Indianness. The show is about Indianness. So, what is your concept of Indian? You kind of touched on it in many different ways, actually. But let's hear it from you.
I think my idea of Indianness with the current scenario, in keeping in mind the current political, economic scenario of India, is that there are many Indias within an India, and we need to embrace all our Indias. If Indians, and I think there's a fundamental problem with us. We are not very proud of our own culture, right? So we'll go to an Indian restaurant in London and start eating with a fork and knife. Why aren't we proud of eating with our hands? Why then do you go to a Japanese restaurant and eat sushi with your chopsticks, right? So I think we need to start first embracing and being proud of who we are and stop being embarrassed. I mean, which is obviously years of colonization and all of that. But I think it's time to move on from that and be like, we are such a rich culture with so many cultures within a culture, and we are secular. We have so much going on. We just need to embrace ourselves and flaunt our real culture to the world, not a borrowed Western culture. Wearing a big Western brands, which is what happens with globalization, which happened with China 10 years back. Now that's happening in India, where everybody's they think wearing these big brands going to make you look cool. No, what's going to make you look cool is if you wear those artisanal designers from India, or you celebrate the local Indian cuisine, or you talk about, the regional cinema or whatever, startups. It's a huge thriving startup scene here. So, let's celebrate ourselves first before we can expect the world to celebrate us. And I think that's what Indianness to me is. I think India really needs to come together and be united a little bit more now. If you want to really take over as superpower, because if you see Chinese people, they're very proud of themselves. Japanese, very proud of themselves. Italian, Spanish. We need to learn. We need to start doing that. And I think we're doing that slowly. But we're also a huge country, so
Yeah.
it's gonna take.
Very diverse country too, but be proud of who we are. Final question. Somebody not in your family living either in India or outside India that of Indian origin that inspires you.
Oh, many
Pick one or two at the most.
of Indian origin, right? From India.
Indian origin, or in India, or of living, not family.
I mean, in Indra Nooyi,
It's a great choice.
Meera Nair,
Excellent choice.
and Amartya Sen, because I also know him personally, the only one I know personally, and he's so successful, but just so humble. Like his humility and just normalness is intimidating. It's
Yeah.
like, how are you so normal? So yeah, I think these are my
Yeah.
because I chose them in particular because they all came from India and they've all made global marks.
Yeah.
With heart.
Great choices. Great choices. Shiva, thank you so much. This has been fabulous. Thank you for being open. Thank you for letting us into a window into your life. Really, really inspiring for a lot of people. And, thanks again. And hopefully, if you come to DC, I'd love to connect up with you. But thanks again for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Hope I didn't blabber too much, which is what I usually do.
No,
But
that's
it's
the
a point.
show.
Yeah,
That's the
exactly.
show. That is the show. But thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
John?